Hello, my name is iAntonio.media, and I'm so happy to be finally republishing this neatly put together set of two conversations that I had with a good friend of mine called Marcia. Now, the episode today is being published under the English Coach podcast, Living the Language, but under the category Life is Feeling, Counting the Ways. Now, what we're going to be looking at are the much more positive aspects of this whole sustainability discourse. I'm sure I don't just speak for myself when I say, sometimes when we hear the word sustainability, we feel so helpless because there's so many things that we need to change in this world that seem so out of reach. They seem so large and, almost impossible to really shift. However, what we'll be talking about today are the things that we are achieving on the ground, the things that are within our reach. As I said, overall, a generally more positive spin on this whole conversation. So it's well worth it to listen. And a little bit of background, Marcia is actually from Brazil. She migrated to Germany a few years ago and has started a lovely family. The thing that we have in common is that I also migrated from Jamaica and, ended up in Germany. I've been here for a few years now. Yesterday, coincidentally, I spoke of the idea of becoming or being a generalist. Both of us have a kind of a generalist flavor because as far as I know, her mixed background has, of course, led her to doing what she's doing right now. And I also have a mixed background that has led me to doing what I'm doing right now. And both of us have experiences that enrich what it is we're offering to the world today and the kind of wisdom and insight and experience and persuasion with which we can approach whatever it is we're doing right now. We put this wonderful argument together. It was dynamic, it was playful, it was conversational, it's no kind of monologue, and it's talking about real things. So, as I said, it is well worth it. And I hope to hear from you. So don't be shy. Tell me what you think. If you see this episode or hear this episode on YouTube, you can send your comments in. If you see it somehow on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or wherever, don't be shy. Send in your questions, your feedback, and all these things. They help us as independent content creators. I like to call myself an independent podcaster. And it will also be helpful to Marcia, of course, who shared of her soul with us today. And I'm really happy to share it with you. All right. So again, as I always say, looking forward to hearing from you. And without further ado, on with the show. With somewhat new sensibilities, owing of course in part to a sense of gratitude she feels for her recently completed MBA at the ESCP Business School in Berlin, Marcia helps me today to portray for you a much more positive outlook on matters relating to sustainability. The things that are, in fact, within our reach, the values that we as people are actively adopting now. We talk a little about the history of the sustainability movement, its incorporation into modern business models, newer concepts such as impact investing as an ever more interesting emerging solution that takes the environment, people, and communities into account. What does it really mean to move capital, people, and knowledge to where the problems really are? And what are the benefits being realized now? What are the opportunities that present themselves today as we approach the ultimate ideal of sustainable living? In this episode 19, you get to dive in to the first part of this rather insightful conversation with us. If you already know that you don't want to miss the second part of this conversation, hit the pause button in your podcast player right now and follow the show. Marcia, it's wonderful to have you here today.
My pleasure.
I looked forward to this. I think we met about, was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago?
Something like that. It was a bit before Corona.
Yes, I remember where and when.
Me too.
But we won't go into that today. Well, the reason why you're here today and the reason why I am so happy is because since I've met you, I've experienced you as an artist from, the perspective of your academic faculties. And I'm very proud to now realize that you have recently finished an MBA. That is correct, yes?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Yes. And, I'm just going to take a little time to introduce who you are for the people and to say what this show is basically about. Now, you've worked in sustainability for a while. You're a mother of a son and you're from Brazil. Now, the episode for today for Life is Feeling Counting the Ways looks at the idea of feeling from three perspectives: the emotional perspective, the experiential perspective, going out into the world, gathering experiences, and also from the perspective of the capacity for empathy. I have invited you today to, from your experience as someone with an MBA, a mother, someone who's worked in sustainability, to just talk to us about small wins, some positives in terms of what you see happening in the world right now. I need from you proof and promise.
All right. I'm gonna try to do the job. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so, what do you see going on right now in terms of sustainability from what you have experienced on the job and also how that comes together with your studies of an MBA?
It's like a dear professor said to us in our graduation. He said, "May you live in interesting times." And I think that's the best wish someone can have for you. And I think that's exactly what we experience in terms of sustainability right now. We have seen the last 30 years, more or less, let's say, since the Rio 92 conference, since the Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, and we have seen a lot of talks. We have seen a lot of interest from academia, from governments and so. But now it's where we see not just people, but business also interested in sustainability. So we see investments being driven to sustainability. We see companies incorporating sustainability in their business model and their value chain. And I think that's what is really interesting about these times regarding sustainability. We are seeing now new investments or new concepts coming. For example, impact investing, which is something that I am absolutely passionate about, because it's exactly the difference that makes in terms of moving capital, personnel, and knowledge to where the problems really are, and trying to really address these problems in a measurable, tangible, and transparent way. And this is what makes me really excited about the times that we are living now.
Now, you definitely mentioned some keywords there: measurable and tangible. Another word or term that jumped out at me was impact investing. You've said that to me maybe 3 times before, but I'm not quite sure what that means. What does it mean?
Sure. So there are 3 concepts or 4 concepts that needs to be differentiated, right? We have sustainability, we have corporate social responsibilities, and then we have ESG, and then we have impact. So when we are talking about, let's say, investments, when we are talking about behavior, there are categories that we need to differentiate. Sustainability can be anything. Mm-hmm. And it can be related to governments, can be related to corporations, can be related to people. It's a way of living, in a way that the resources that we have today gonna still be there for the next generations, years, and so on. So I think trying to make things that last, to sustain. Then we have CSR, which means that when companies, then corporations, they take this sustainability practice into the business, It can be in many ways, can be for philanthropic reasons, can be for the way that the companies want to be perceived by the public or by investors or by the government. And in a step further, it can be very strategically, like how these social responsibility are incorporated in the value chain. These are behavior, right? But then we have the investment side of it. And then we have ESG, and then you have impact. ESG, it's how company does things related to environment, social, and governance. So it's how companies treat the waste, how companies treat the usage of the raw material and supply chain, and so can be ways that they relate or deal with the employers, suppliers, investors, and so, and the way that the leadership it's managed, or how salaries are transparent, and these are the governance.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a very damaging company can be very high in ESG. You can have a coal company, you can have a tobacco company that have a really nice waste management,
Mm-hmm.
that can have really fair or a program for employees, and can be very transparent about the leadership position.
Yes.
And it's still going to be high in ESG, although we are creating a lot of damage for society. And then we have what is impact. And impact came to my life when I was doing my executive MBA in a school called ESCP. And for this program, we don't have a thesis to deliver. We need to have a consulting project. And our project was about how to measure social impact.
Mm-hmm.
We and my beloved team went through the path to understand what's impact and why that's important, and why this is the way forward if we really want to change something. And impact is a positive change in environment and society that can be measured and profitable. So the key word here is measurement. Because if you cannot measure its sustainability, is SDG,
Mm-hmm.
can be anything. But impact, you can say that's impactful
Mm-hmm.
if you have data, if you have information about it. And some months ago, I got in contact with a beautiful book called Impact Revolution from an author called Sir Ronald Cohen. And he's what they call the godfather of impact investing. And what he says is that as the same way that companies today and organizations needs to deliver financial reports, and the same way that investments are assessed with two dimensions, risk and profitability, society are moving forward to demand also impact reporting. And also companies going to be evaluated for profit, risk, and impact.
Profit, risk, and impact.
Exactly.
Of course, there are a few things that jumped out. As I've mentioned before, I had the privilege of also doing some sustainability studies in the past in the UK, the University of Lancaster. And during that time, I was introduced to the idea of the real costs, environmental costs, the real cost that is sometimes ignored in the environment, the damage to environment that is not taken into consideration. And if it's ignored, then of course it's not measured, right? Also as a trainer, I'm an adult educator, and one of our greatest challenges is to make learning progress, learning goals and all of these things together measurable. Yes, how do you make the learning experience measurable? And what I'm getting from what you're saying here is impact investment has a lot to do with looking at all the aspects also within society, all the stakeholders, not only the shareholders. You're also saying that in the future, companies will be called to give not only financial reports, but also reports on the impacts that they're having on society. Is that correct?
Exactly. So, for example, I think we live in a very interesting place as well, not just interesting time. Like living in Europe, living in Germany, it's a way more advanced in that sense than we compare with another countries, like the EU taxonomy. It's there. There is this obligation for public companies to deliver the non-disclosure financial reports where they need really to disclosure what they are doing in terms of environment and social and so. Also, it's about to come the social taxonomy that's going to really classify what does really mean social for investment or social impact in terms of a company responsibility. That's the thing. Impact, it's always there. We always had impact, but what is the challenge so far for driving investment in this class of asset? It's the measurement of it, right? That's the challenge. But finally, we are also living in very interesting times because we finally have the technology to do so. We have AI, we have satellite images that can source reforestation or deforestations in a very remote forest with just a satellite image. We have these data, and so we have the resources today to do this measurement impact. And that's what didn't happen before.
What are people saying, and what is driving some of the myths associated with sustainability? Considering the real potential to serve the unserved, to unlock new possibilities, to improve lives, also in ways that are interesting for business. What was missing in the past that no longer is? And what are the tools that we've always had? In this section, we also mentioned microstoria, something we discussed in episode 65 of English Coach Podcast Living the Language, the sister show to this. All right? So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to also check that out. Link in the show notes.
And interesting thing is that with everyone that I talk about this topic, about social impact, the very first reaction that I got, but it's not possible to measure. How are you going to measure impact? We have been doing that for a long time. That's what government does. That's what the statistics does. Well-being, happiness, freedom are things that are intangible and difficult to measure. But calculating the number of children that are passed in a certain that got access to gymnasium, for example, or to calculate the numbers of inmates that didn't come back to prison after a while, or this kind of information, it's there, and it's not really the rocket science to measure it. Mm-hmm. What was missing, I would say, is lack of will, and people see this kind of business related to social impact as philanthropy. And that's the big mistake. There is money. It's profitable. It's interesting for business to invest in social impact. If you think, what is the potential to serve, to give a business or opportunity to this unserved population? How many people is out there that doesn't have, let's say, the access to banking or doesn't have access to the financial asset? What would happen if you unlock that opportunity at the same time that we are improving their livelihoods? So that's what's impact about. It's changing society in a positive way, but still be profitable.
That sounds good. And thank you, Marcia, for this. I'm feeling very positive right now. And I just want to reiterate, our goal for today is to look at feeling in terms of these three perspectives again: the emotional, the experiential, and the capacity for empathy. I am sensing that from what you are saying, these things are actually already built in because, of course, there's the emotional, the sense of hope that things are indeed happening, and it is becoming more and more interesting for business to focus a little bit more on impact investing or investing in terms of impact, having it measured. And this measurability is also something that is coming from, I get the feeling that it's more of a top-down kind of thing, because I get the feeling that regulation is what will force businesses somehow or encourage to take these things more into consideration. So you have experienced that is happening now, and also the capacity for empathy you touched on in terms of the lives of, for example, indigenous communities, what it means, what is the value of giving them hope and perspective, and how is it interesting to make their lives and their operations, profitable. You spoke of microfinancing there, which is something that I'm also familiar with. There's another guy, I studied with him. He's now Professor David Sapong in the UK. We spoke about microstoria recently, which was another episode I did a few months back, and I can link to that in the show notes. But in that episode, we spoke about the advantage of giving the small voice a stage, because sometimes they have insights that, someone at the top might not have time to take notice of, or is incapable of taking notice of. So, you've definitely touched on these three things, and thank you for that. Now, in terms of the small wins, however, because a lot of this that you mentioned, I can relate to it. But how about the small wins for the everyday person? The mother or the father doing his shopping on a Saturday, one morning going out and saying, well, I'm going to make some sustainable choices. What kind of small wins do you see happening right now in the life of the normal person who's probably not even thinking so much? The man unseen is what our next section is about. Regenerative agriculture and buying locally. And while we're here, let me ask you a personal question. Have you signed up for the private listeners group yet? I ask this question also in solidarity with the great many seen but somehow unseen creators in this context, independent podcasters who like to come into direct contact with you and who need your support. There are many ways. I want to invite you to take 30 seconds to check out support.iAntonio.media and see the many ways in which you can support your favorite independent podcaster. It does not mean that you have to send money or comments or give your credit card number or open yourself up to the violation of your private or personal data. I've listed many ways in which you can support the show. Now, speaking of being seen or unseen, in episode 80 of my other show, again, English Coach Podcast, Living the Language, the sister show to this, entitled Teaching, Training, Coaching, and Notions of the Perfect Love, with accomplished educator and sailorman Uwe Müller, we talked about the meaning of being loved as being not unseen. I hereby challenge you to be not unseen by giving meaning to the things you think about the show and using the contact form to add to the conversation. That would make me and all my guests very happy.
I think that for the normal person, or let's say the person that's unseen, I'm not going to say the small one, but the unseen. Mm-hmm. I think that there are a lot of wins. There are a lot of options out there. The first one is access to local food, agriculture. I mean, when we are talking about sustainability, of course, we're going to talk about energy, we're going to talk about transport, but what is one of the centers of discussions is agriculture and the farm industry and so. And today, farms can be or the heroes or the villains of the story in terms of sustainability. And there are a way way many heroes out there that are not seen. The small farmers that do with the right practice, taking care of the animals' well-being and so on and so on. So the small consumer today, they have access to these products that are done, that are produced in a sustainable way. And that creates a whole value in terms of for the mother, for the children, in terms of the quality of nutrition that they're going to have, for the farmers that going to have a better income. If this farmer follows a regenerative agriculture practice or even organic practice, the soil going to win, the biodiversity is going to win, the animals going to win. So that's what's interesting that I see.
Why do you say agriculture is the villain and the hero? What do you mean?
As you said, I come from Brazil. And basically 85% of Brazilian carbon emission comes from deforestation. And deforestation in Brazil happens only and foremost because of agriculture, especially for soya plantations or cattle ranching and so on. So agriculture can also be a villain in this monoculture industrial way. They rip out all the nutrients of the soil. And they, with the fertilizers, with the pesticides and monoculture, and so they basically kill the biodiversity around. So, but agriculture can be one big villain in that sense.
But you're saying it's also a hero now.
It's a hero because if we do the right practice to regenerate the soil, not just nutritionally speaking, gonna be amazing for the yields, for the production gonna be a way better. But the soil gonna win, and the biodiversity in that soil gonna win. And then, if one of the most the resources that we have for storage carbon, it's soil actually. Everybody thinks about soil storage like the forests, and so yes, of course, storages are amazing, are super important, but few people see that the soil is the key for carbon capture. And soil, it's scalable. You cannot scale a forest forever, but you can do that with soil. So, and then when you mix, you don't have a monocultural practice, but you have a diverse crops. When you mix herbs with vegetables, with trees, you create a whole ecosystem that's going to beneficiate not just the crops, because they will be way more resilient for plagues or for diseases or for other things that affect climate, for example.
Natural disasters as well.
Exactly.
I mean, we all know how mangroves protect coastlines and trees protect from wind erosion, water erosion, and all of that. Yes,
exactly.
Yes,
but here in Germany, for example, like year after year, we have the hottest summer ever. And this is basically creating desertification in the soil. The way to prevent that is regenerative agriculture. It will make the soil resilient for the climate change. And then you improve the lives of the farmers. You guarantee that the consumer is going to have access to good food. Taxes are paid, government wins. It's win-win-win-win situation.
Yes.
So this regenerative agriculture and organic agriculture, it's a big win for the small ones.
Yes. I the name of the show is Life is Feeling, yes, and we're all allowed to change our minds and so on. I am also allowed to kind of dance with that idea of feeling, not just the emotional aspect, but when I first met you, I sensed an intensity. I don't know, I saw it in your eyes, and I tend to see that. But now I know, you've confirmed certain things. I know now that you're a qualified lawyer, so you are aware of the power, which is language, first of all. You have done sustainability, which is, it has a lot to do with ideas and hope and many subjective aspects and trying to measure the unmeasurable sometimes, We're trying also to be positive here today. And I have hope. And, I'm thinking here now, when I think of the complexity of the environment, I know a little bit about biodiversity. I mean, from a child, I was very interested in plants and animals. I know how soil is formed, how it works, and so on. And I also know that sometimes when we as human beings fool ourselves into thinking that we understand complex systems, and we fool ourselves into thinking that we can kind of like impose our management models onto complex systems that we probably don't even ourselves understand. It's only recently we understood the link between, let's say, the wolf in the forest and, availability of water and rivers, things like that, things that you would never expect. My question to you is this. All of this seems to be coming from top down. It feels like regulation. It feels like businesses, investment preparing itself for new rules that they will have to follow later on, because being a business student myself, I know that normally business is only concerned with shareholders and not so much stakeholders. And I've lived in Germany. I know that there's great respect for rules and regulations. I also know that every single tree in Germany has a number, and there are no natural forests left as far as I know. And that is a kind of impact on this idea that we can manage everything.
It's a big illusion, in my opinion. The idea that we can control complex ecosystem. I mean, Mother Earth has been slapping us back and forward for many years, right? So it's so talking about feelings.
Yes.
I think when you are dealing with society, environment, the very much feeling that we need to have is respect. It's respect for the unknown, the complexity, as you said. When you come from this feeling of respect, you will not impose. You're gonna listen, and that's what it's really important when you are talking, especially when you are dealing with communities. You need. And then the community could be a local community, indigenous community, can be the little family who lives in a poor neighborhood here in Berlin, When you are talking about impact, when you are talking about environment and social impact, we need to start from this point of respect that it's complex and we don't understand. And we need to listen and check the data and check the informations. So that is what's essential. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people and companies that work with sustainability are making, is this idea that they know better. And knowing better, even if it's with the best of the intentions, right? Even if it's done from an empathy perspective. If you do not put yourself in a position that you acknowledge that the other person knows their situation better than you, you're gonna do nothing. You're gonna create damage.
Understand. As I sit here, I've asked you a difficult question. And this is a difficult topic. You're a brave person to take this on. And I sit here and I feel empathy right now. Because, as I said, I've studied business, I've studied sustainability. And as far as I'm concerned, there are many ways in which they do not come together. However, we can try. We also say cats and dogs don't understand each other, but I've seen them in loving relationships before. They even say the same about men and women sometimes, but that somehow through the whole Spannung or creative tension that exists, it makes it beautiful. It's a wonderful dance like tango, And I asked you one question and you said, about small wins, your answer would be, at this point in time, a good example for positivity is buying locally. Yes? And you also cited agriculture as being, whether it be a villain or a hero, we have to decide how we're going to use it. I am sitting in front of you right now, and I'm hearing you talking about community, and I'm sensing the idea of values. One of my values as a podcaster is to help you, the listener, to keep your finger on why we're here. We're talking about the emotional, the experiential, and the capacity for empathy. And one of my values as a podcaster is to listen. I am hearing, yes, from all of this, that you also have a sensitivity towards communities. You, as I said earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it, but coming from Brazil into Germany, into Europe, you express a capacity to integrate into a new society. So you have a respect for new societies, for other societies. You have that yourself. You know how to deal with creative tension, being creative, being an artist. You work with art with me before, and all these things come into play. And what is the question really? The question here is, you've seen the Amazon. You've lived close to one of the biggest things that represents, the thing that epitomizes this whole sustainability aspect. Tell me a little bit more about society and maybe local communities, right? What is really happening there? Because I don't see how, business is gonna even care about a local society. How am I going to go to someone who does not share my values, who does not want, for example, the goods that I hold as beautiful, the cars and the apartments and the expensive clothes and the jewelry and all that? How am I going to say to this guy, listen, live this way? How are you going to get them to either adjust their way of life, or how are you going to get society to adjust their way of life from your experience, from seeing the Amazon? I myself am from the Caribbean, a pulsating little island born of fire, and the third largest in the volcanic archipelago known as the Greater Antilles. Jamaica is the land of my birth, yet as I sit here in lovely Berlin, I reminisce that the closest I ever came to the Amazon was through once owning a parrot of the same name called Amazona colaria, or simply said, yellow-billed parrot. It's a common pet. Well, it was once a common pet. I don't know if it's the same because I think they're now endangered, and many people had them in Jamaica. That was the closest I came. Now, needless to say, I still have memories of this beautiful bird, living with it. It could talk. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl. And that is really the closest I ever came. Yet, I still have a sense of wonder when it comes to the Amazon. And in part 2 of this conversation, coming up in episode 20 or 21 of Life is Feeling Counting the Ways, we will be looking at values and a diversity of successful survival strategies that are in effect, so to speak, in and around the Amazon that we can all learn from. Marcia also goes into her outlook on how she thinks the younger generation is gonna, make things better, and, the positive aspects or the positive contributions that they bring. Now, part 2 of this conversation promises to be just as intriguing, just as compelling, and I really do invite you to, subscribe now if you haven't, or follow the show, depending on how it's listed in your player, if you don't want to miss it. It's really wonderful, and I think it proper to do justice to long form content in this way by kind of breaking it up sometimes because, you can download the shows, you can pause it, you can always come back and listen again. And that's a wonderful thing about podcasting. But I want you to let this information sit and incubate. It's well worth it. It made me really happy to do this today. I've always wanted to talk about the more positive aspects of this whole sustainability thing because, all we seem to be hearing these days are negative stories, sad stories. And, if that's all we hear, then it seems like too much of a distant concept that is somehow unreachable. It is reachable, and we are reaching it as we speak. Another thing that I can promise for the other episode is just a little idea I had. I was taking a walk the other day through Schöneberg in Berlin and looking to interview some people on a totally different topic, AI. And, I did get some interviews, but, sometimes people are a little bit shy. They didn't really want to be recorded, so I had to find something else to do. And what I did, something very strange happened that day. Something that I did record, by the way, so you will hear. It's quite interesting and thought-provoking, or, profound, provocative, poignant even. And I'm going to play it for you and go through with you, share with you, the whole thought process that happened in that moment. It had a little bit about reflecting on oneself and what you have to do sometimes to evolve into a new person, a new state of being, and also, whether it be shedding old values or adopting new ones in addition to the ones you already have. But it was a wonderful exercise and, something I did on my own. As I said, I wasn't successful that day getting interviews, but I think I'm going to be starting the next episode, the follow-up episode to this, the part 2 to this one, with that little exercise. I'm going to share it with you, all right? So again, as I always say, with a small win is always a good way to begin. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and bye for now. Hello, today it's all about sustainable living, a positive outlook, also in the eyes of business, people, and the communities they serve. Part 2. Now we tie our conversations in to feeling from the emotional, the experiential, and the empathetic attributes. I waited a long time for this conversation, and for this part 2, I did not want to do the same to you. I also wanted to publish part 2 today on the first day of celebrations, starting on the 1st of August up until the 6th, leading up to International Youth Day, which is actually commemorated on the 12th of August. Now, I've chosen to make this publication of part 2 today for many reasons, which I am sure you'll figure out for yourself by the end of this very short 20-minute episode. In part 1, I also promised to share with you a little extra reflection, but I think I'll save that for the next episode because, among other things, I'm a little bit under the weather today, as you might hear. I hope you enjoy part 2 and do feel free to share your thoughts. That would make me and Marcia very happy. So then, without further ado, on with the show. What is the question really? The question here is, you've seen the Amazon. You've lived close to one of the biggest things that represents, the thing that epitomizes this whole sustainability aspect. Tell me a little bit more about society and maybe local communities, right? What is really happening there? Because I don't see how, business is gonna even care about a local society. How am I going to go to someone who does not share my values, who does not want, for example, the goods that I hold, the cars and the apartments and the expensive clothes and the jewelry and all that? How am I going to say to this guy, listen, live this way? How are you going to get them to either adjust their way of life, or how are you going to get society to adjust their way of life from your experience, from seeing the Amazon?
I would say that it's not even from the Amazon, because one thing that I would like to the listeners understand is that Brazil, it's a continent, right?
Brazil? No, well, oh,
No,
yeah.
I mean,
Come
it's a
on,
way too
you're
big.
being bad to me. It's a very big country. Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
a very big.
South America is a continent. Yes,
Yeah,
but
it's a way too big. What? Sorry.
it's my sense of wonder here. You know, I
Yeah.
want to have that because you're one
Yeah.
of the few people I know from
No,
Brazil. You
what
know.
what I mean to say is that Amazon, Brazilians don't know Amazon.
Oh my God! What are you saying?
Yes, that's very true. Amazon, for many Brazilians, is this distant realm as for Europeans. And that's what I wanted to say. It's like Amazon, it's amazing, it's immense, but it's distant. For example, where I come from in Brazil, I come from the coast, and Amazon, it's like 3,000-4,000 kilometers away from me, 4,000-5,000 kilometers away from the south of Brazil. And there is no roads to there. The only way to get there is by plane. And you're gonna get in a plane in a big city, which doesn't have forests. And then to go to Amazon, you need to get dirty roads, hours or days inside a boat and things like that. So that's how distant it's Amazon, even for Brazilians. And my sense of local communities is started from the place that I am from, Brazil. That's quite the opposite of Amazon. So I come from a state called Paraíba, and Paraíba, we have a coast, which is beautiful, Caribbean of Brazil, holidays, dreams for Brazilians. But if you drive 2 hours in the countryside, you are in a desertic place. You are in a place where rains 2-3 times a year. Rains enough to not be a desert, but still, it's very arid. And in that place, actually, it's where my father comes from. In that place, it's agriculture. It's the only way of living. And then you can imagine when you are in an emerging country that lives out of agriculture and in a region that doesn't rain, means that the poverty levels there are really high. And despite the poverty or despite the challenge, I got to learn to respect these local communities for the joy that they have, for the wisdom that they have, for the way that they lead their lives with concepts like honor, with concepts of perseverance, with the concepts of empathy, like helping each other. So the thing about the local community is they have a wisdom of way of life that we in big cities, we cannot really grasp. So, and as you said, I had the opportunity to go to Amazon last year. It was and then it was my first time in Amazon. And it was an amazing, breathtaking experience. And I went there and stayed 1 week with a local community there. And the same feeling that I had with the local community that my father is from, that's 3,000, 5,000 kilometers away, completely different environment. It was the same feeling that I felt with the local community in Amazon. This wisdom, this capacity to understand the real importance and rhythm of life, and to understand how make nature to help you, not nature being something that you need to overcome, but something that you need to integrate. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that we are in the mess that we are today as society because we miss that. we do not understand that nature is not an oppositor. Nature, actually, it's an ally. It depends how you relate to that. And then comes to my first point, it's respect. These local communities, they have respect for the environment that they live in. They are part of an ecosystem. They are not an alien of the ecosystem. And this is what these local communities taught me. And I was profoundly touched by it. Not just in Amazon, but also in this arid region. And the same thing when you go to, as I said, a community in a big city, but it's from people that needs to stick together and find their ways to live despite their diversity. So local communities and indigenous populations, they have the key for finding our way out of this environment crisis that we are. There is in Amazon, indigenous populations, like for millennia, are create what we call terra preta.
Yeah.
And it's just a way that they have to produce a very rich land in terms of nutrition, because in the end of the day, they live out of what nature gives. And that's where I think that the local communities are not just, let's say, part of an investment of a company, but they are source of wisdom and informations. And companies, business, and decision makers that are smart enough, they're gonna listen to that.
That leads me to my next question. I mean, you actually kind of like asked yourself, but where I was going, we started with values, and well, I got, there's so many questions that I have and so many things I also want to share myself. But one of my values as a podcaster is also to listen. So I have listened to you and I've heard you speak about respect. I've heard you speak about the nature being an ally and not, something that is against us. These things I know. I suspect that it comes a lot from, Judaistic religions, to think that, we should somehow dominate nature, break it to our will. But I also listened to you saying that, we're part of nature, of course, to acknowledge the complexity. However, a lot of business is about risk. I think both of us can agree with that. It's also about measurability of risk. So business is concerned with that. Our goal today is still to focus on not necessarily the things that are not working, but the things that are working. And you're saying to me that with impact investments, businesses are no longer just imposing abstract models onto societies, onto people, but they're paying attention. Is that what you're saying from your experience? They're paying attention to these unique adaptations that are also happening in other different communities.
To be very honest, it's not all impact investments that do that. That's not all impact investments that listen to the population and identifying the problem and so.
But you have to listen to see the impact.
Yes, but it's not always that it happens, right?
Okay.
What I mean to say is that the successful ones, the ones that are going to thrive, are the ones that do so. Because one aspect of impact investing is that people that are interested in it should keep in mind is that impact is a long-term thing. Of course, you can have impact in a short term, but to be really sustainable, like to sustain through the time, this impact needs to be, long-term planned. Means that the financial return for that probably gonna be long-term as well. And one thing that I always say is that nature doesn't follow the time of the market. if you are investing in a society, you're going to see the fruits of that society. You're going to see the results of that work, maybe in the next generation. And if you are doing a reforestation project, or if you are doing a biodiversity gain project, maybe it's going to take 10, 20 years to get a result of it. So impact investing, it's very interesting, but you need to come to this point where investors and entrepreneurs need to have the right motivation. If profit and only profit, it's the motivation for impact, I'm sorry, but you are doing something that's not gonna happen, because investors and business people needs to be patient with impact. Mm-hmm. But impact, it's gonna last. It's gonna be, you do not face the same risks, for example, with a fast-paced business that you know what's today, but you don't know what's gonna be in 5-10 years. So when business listen to communities, when business listen to this wisdom, that ancient reasons, the chances that they're gonna be successful, it's gonna be a way higher. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's important when you are doing a project or a business related to communities or to the environment. You always put the local communities in the center of this project or this business, because they're gonna be not just the stakeholders, but they're gonna be the biggest source of opportunity and risk. And then it's where people should really pay attention in terms of the communities that they are working with.
Yeah. Marcia, is it happening now?
It is.
Yeah?
It is. It
okay.
is. Slowly and steady, but it is. There are some examples of it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And, we're coming to the end, and you've been very generous in your talk. I feel as if you were also, authentic and thoughtful with your answers. Of course, there are many things that also come to mind. What's good is that we're definitely talking this. I recognize the language of this. It's good to know that businesses are paying attention. It's good to know that, top-down regulations, are coming that will kind of push or encourage business, our commercial interests to pay more attention. I'm recognizing the consideration for, what I called during my study days in sustainability, planet, profit, and people. Mm-hmm. I recognize the feeling of social enterprise, incorporating local societies. Of course, I'm thinking also of, the large geopolitical aspects, the value of the Amazon. Mm-hmm. That's a little further from you than I thought, what the value of that is to the world and so on. Thank you for that explanation. I had a vision of these two areas. Somehow I imagined the Pampa where all the, the alpaca live. I don't remember, steppe land, which is somewhere in South America as well, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I also imagined the more forested areas where you told me about before. So you have an idea of different communities and how they come to terms with their own environment and the adaptation that, conscious business will have to do and are now paying more attention to. But, as we close off, as someone who's a little bit, just like me, sensitive somehow to both worlds. How does this whole movement make you feel as a person, as a mother of a son?
I would say quite hopeful. Especially because of my son and his generation and my young colleagues. I have a colleague that she is 24 years old. And the most passionate, driven person about impact, not just sustainability, about impact. I see the same thing with my son. I listen the same thing what happens at school. We see this whole movement that we had with the Fridays for Tomorrow and so on. So I think that these whole discussions, it's given me hope. I know the challenges. I'm very aware that a lot of these talks related to sustainability are just a way to, let's say, to fit in the trend, not really exactly real. But I'm not sure that we're still gonna have time to do the change that we need. Right? It's the realistic aspect of it. But I think that we are moving the right direction. I like to be this hopeful, realistic person. I know that changes should be done in a faster pace than we have now. But this next generation, the way that our people are getting more and more aware of the impacts of the decisions on a daily basis, in terms of course, recycling, in terms of energy consumption, in terms of the food that they eat, and all of this count. All of this count. And one of the things that counts the most, and I would talk forever if I could about it, it's elections. Every single person has a very, very powerful role in this sustainability. And of course, comes through the job that you work, comes to the goods that you buy, the investments that you made, but the political decisions also that you make. So for the people out there and for the listeners, and I would say you can do your recycling, separating your trash the best way if you do not pay attention and you do not engage in the right political position towards the sustainability goals. We're gonna be drying ice, as we say in Brazil.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? I insisted on taking a positive spin on this. And what you're still saying to me, yes, of course. And of course, be mindful of the worst outcome that we should be. But we still have access. You spoke about voice. You spoke about, the elections, the electorate, democratic frameworks, and so on. Everybody has a way to live out the small wins, which starts, as you rightly said, from recycling, from buying local, maybe thinking about travel, and so on. Little ways in which we can make a positive change, maybe even adjusting our values. Yeah, me, for example, in Jamaica, I had to have a car. But here in Berlin, I don't need one. I miss a car sometimes, because, I've been single for a while now, and it would be nice, to drive around some lady. But, in terms of the values that exist in society, in Berlin, I'm happy that, I don't really have to have a car. And it's not like in Jamaica where, a car defines you as a man. Yeah, so I think there is possibility to adjust your values. I've even started eating vegetarian recently. I wouldn't give it a chance a few years ago. And now I do.
Yeah, despite what I said, I'm very hopeful indeed. Like my son has influenced my parents to change the diet. So what I mean to say is that, yes, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because of this new generation that's coming. And how this new generation are pushing the change. So, and I am also hopeful because of all the resources and all the investments in knowledge, in research, in new business models that are coming from supporting these changes. So yeah, we are living interesting times.
Fantastic. Okay, so before we close, is there anything else that you want to ask me, or is there one particular message that you have for the listener? Anything that I, didn't ask?
I would say to the listeners that you are a key for the change, for all this change impact in sustainability. Keep positive. I know sometimes it's overwhelming what we see around us with all the news and so, but human beings have this amazing capability to adapt and thrive. So keep positive. Mind where your money and time and efforts go. And you're going to be part of this beautiful change that we all need.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcia. I feel wonderful that I've managed finally to do this with you. I will help you with this message in the best way I can. And for all the listeners out there, as Marcia said, keep positive and focus on the small wins, and also the new generation, give them space also to unfold. All the best, Marcia. Thanks
Thank you so much.
again.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.